Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best Limitless team for Matchday 10, the second leg of the knockout phase playoffs, and we do have 2 free transfers at our disposal, and we can use a booster this week, so either the Limitless or the wildcard chip, and both of them are vastly different. Those differences and similarities are discussed in my chip strategy guide and my how to play UCL Fantasy video, but we do get an unlimited budget with the Limitless booster, and we already had a 5 million increase to our budget in the knockout phase playoffs for Matchday 9, and we had some incredible results and returns, even one of the biggest of all time in UCL Fantasy. I'll be discussing possible rotation, suspensions, injuries, and much more, not just in this video, but throughout all my content. That includes the best wildcard squad for Matchday 10 and the team selection, and keep your eyes peeled for tomorrow's deadline stream. I'll be answering all your questions and delving into all the key stats, updates, and team news that you need. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Let's get this video specifically to over 100 likes and also keep on pushing towards new goals like 39k subscribers on YouTube. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for likes to my videos, proud to comments, amongst my other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. The code is seinof, and all your points from Matchday 1 will be counted. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The main appeal of the Limitless chip is having an unlimited budget, and if you still have this chip available, I would recommend either Matchday 10 or 12, because as you get deeper into the competition, you have fewer teams to choose from, you're more limited in terms of options, and it becomes easier to build your sort of ideal 15-man squad. And personally, I'd probably favor Matchday 12 instead, because we're going to have premiums from Arsenal, Barcelona, and other top teams like Liverpool, for example, Manchester City as well. And with this sort of pool of players we've got at the moment, I think it's quite easy to build your sort of ideal 50-man squad with that 5 million increase we got to our budget. There won't be yet another one, by the way, in terms of another increase to our budget. That is pretty much going to be it. And it doesn't mean we have 105 million to spend. Only if you're completely new to UCL Fantasy. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen that my squad value is quite substantial, actually, at around 108.5 million, with that included in terms of the money in the bank. But I will start off with the 2 goalkeepers, and you have to pick 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards. You can make substitutions in this game and change the captaincy from the Tuesday to the Wednesday if necessary, and I'll be talking about the best options on each individual day, with rotation included as well. There is an element of risk with Nick Pope and most Newcastle players because they beat Qarabag 6-1 in the first leg, and some predicted lineups do have Aaron Ramsdale in there, at least from some Newcastle fans and pages. So I would be quite wary about Nick Pope, and he's currently in my UCL Fantasy team, but I talked about this last week that we have 2 of the best goalkeepers playing on the same day in Nick Pope and Jan Sommer. So if you have any doubts about Pope starting, then go for the safer pick in Sommer. But Bodo Glimt have a 3-1 lead against Inter Milan, and despite Inter now playing at home, it's still not going to be a foregone conclusion that they keep a clean sheet against the Bodo Glimt side that beat the likes of Manchester City and Atletico Madrid, and they've been scoring plenty of goals throughout the entire competition. So that could still not be a great pick in isolation, but I think Courtois might be the best overall goalkeeper for Matchday 10. He's facing Benfica at home, and he delivered 7 points in Matchday 9. He made some great saves to deny Benfica, and he kept that clean sheet in a 1-0 victory for Real Madrid. So I think Courtois is by far the best option on the Wednesday. But when it comes down to your Tuesday choice, I think it's between Jan Sommer and Nick Pope, with Newcastle having a better chance of a clean sheet, but at the same time, the rotation is more likely there, and that's why it might be an unsafe pick from that perspective. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Are you opting for Nick Pope or Jan Sommer? And I think that'll be one of the biggest debates heading into Matchday 10, but ultimately, I would pick one of them as your Tuesday goalkeeper for the upcoming deadline. After a full rest against Bodo Glimt in the Champions League, Federico Di Marco got an assist over the weekend in a 2-0 win over Lecce, and Inter Milan are flying at the top of the Serie A table with 8 wins out of the last 10 matches across all competitions, but their 2 defeats have come against the likes of Arsenal and Bodo Glimt in the Champions League, so they have been lacking a little bit in certain big games this season. We've even seen that against the likes of Juventus early in the campaign, but I think Di Marco is a brilliant option still, and a clean sheet is possible. I'm not that confident in Inter Milan keeping a clean sheet against Bodo Glimt to double or triple up on their defence, but that's still viable with Jan Sommer in goal and Federico Di Marco. You don't need anybody else, in my opinion, from the entire setup Lautaro Martinez is injured and reports indicate he'll be out for a month. So we could see Pio Esposito start alongside Thuram up front, and Calhanoglu will probably return this weekend, but not in time for Matchday 10. So when it comes down to Inter assets, DeMarco is the best one, and Jan Sommer would be second. I would double up on PSG defensively though, with Nuno Mendes, and you've got plenty of choices here. Marquinhos is solid, Pacho is a ball recovery machine, but I would personally go for a very reliable option in terms of goal output and assists in Hakimi, who hasn't had a great season by the way, but he started over the weekend in a 3-0 win over Metz. Nuno Mendes got a full rest, and the same goes for other key players like Pacho, but Hakimi scored in that 3-2 win over Monaco, and Paris Saint-Germain were in a precarious situation. They were 2-0 down, but the likes of Doué, who came off the bench and made an immediate impact, and Hakimi were the game changers, and that's what you always get with these defenders with a high ceiling, and we've got 3 of them in this team already, in DeMarco, Nuno Mendes and Hakimi, and whilst Mendes might not be as comparable to the other two in terms of goals and assists, he can still provide them, and this season he has been brilliant and stepping up his goal output. As for Alejandro Grimaldo, we have seen that over the last couple of seasons for Bayer Leverkusen. He is one of the best left wing backs in world football, and he got an assist against Olympiacos in the first leg, a 2-0 win for Bayer Leverkusen, and they got revenge because they faced Olympiacos in the league phase and lost 2-0, but let's see if they can see this through and advance to the round of 16. But I think these 4 defenders are nailed on in this squad. I know you've got plenty of options like Dan Burn, Bastoni, and possibly Pacho, but I think these 4 would be quite locked in with this UCL Fantasy team, and I think Newcastle are worth covering defensively, but rotation is certainly possible. But with a lot of predicted lineups, I have seen Dan Burn in the lineup, and that's why I would opt for him as the final defender, and it's even worth doubling up on that Newcastle defence, but it's still definitely up for debate, and a safer play would be going for Sommer over Pope, and I have to make that very clear just in case you are doubting certain players starting for the Toon, and it makes sense for them to rotate after that 6-1 win in the first leg. So that's what we get in knockout football. You can get rotation, and if there is a massive lead after the first leg, then it becomes very difficult to predict if certain players and key UCL fantasy assets will start for the sort of remainder of the tie. But I think Dan Burn is more likely than Nick Pope at this moment in time. But it's now actually the opportunity to go to the midfield because we have 5 spots here, and there are plenty of options at our disposal despite a few injuries and also players who are unavailable. But I still think it's going to be a very interesting choice. Do we go for Anthony Gordon, who scored 4 goals in the first half against Karabakh and produced 27 points, because he is one of those players who could be rested, but he's also second in the top scorers list for the Champions League, only behind Mbappe, and he has the most points of any player in UCL Fantasy. But maybe Harvey Barnes as a differential could be more nailed on in that Newcastle lineup, and that could also be factored in when building our Limitless or wildcard squads. The same goes for our free transfers as well, by the way, and because I've got no chips remaining and only 2 available moves, I'm going to be focusing on my suspension and injured player, which will be covered in the team selection video. After a penalty miss against Monaco, Vitinha produced 1 point, which was so disappointing in Matchday 9, but he is still the second highest scoring midfielder in the game, but Anthony Gordon leapfrogged him, and there is a massive gap now between the two, which I don't see Vitinha really covering anytime soon, but I think Vitinha is still one of the best midfielders in UCL Fantasy, with Player of the Match award potential, ball recoveries, and plenty of goals this season with 5 in the Champions League. That includes a hat-trick against Tottenham Hotspur, and the assists have been a bit lackluster in this competition, but he has been doing it in Ligue 1 with some solid performances in recent matches, but not many goal contributions, and that's why Vitinha is very template, but I think you don't have to go for him. I don't see him as an essential pick in UCL Fantasy, but a very consistent and reliable performer, and I think in FPL, for example, Declan Rice would be a very comparable figure in that game. But the second midfielder I'm going for is from Paris Saint-Germain, and Desiree Doué was one of the most impactful players in Matchday 9. He came on for Ousmane Dembele, who couldn't carry on after 27 minutes, and after just a minute or two, Doué already scored. He was involved in all the goals, and he had a great performance with 19 points, only overshadowed by Anthony Gordon. And I went for Kvaratskhelia in the end, and I talked about Doué in my team selection, but after seeing all the lineups and the predictions suggesting that he would be on the bench, that's what put me off Doué in the first place. But it goes to show how impactful substitutions can be in UCL Fantasy, not just in terms of what happens in terms of performances and a certain player coming off the bench and making all the difference, but also when you make subs yourself from the Tuesday to the Wednesday, and Desiree Doué is going to be a great player to have for the 25th of February when we come to the Wednesday fixtures as well. He might even be considered for the captaincy too, but we've also got Kylian Mbappe on that particular day. So I think having two PSG midfielders is worthwhile. I was very bullish on Ousmane Dembele because he boasts a brilliant record against Monaco, but the injury problems he's been suffering from recently have definitely reared their ugly head, and that's why the Dembele pick was very promising but ultimately fell flat. And Desiree Doué has very low ownership at 3% at the moment, but this will rise before we get to the matchday 10 deadline, that's for sure. The third midfielder is Vinicius Jr., who scored against Benfica and he got 7 points, and I think a Player of the Match award is possible for the second leg. He also scored against Osasuna over the weekend in a 2-1 loss for Real Madrid, who have 7 wins and 3 defeats out of the last 10 games across all competitions, and Barcelona closed the gap at the top of the La Liga table, so it's going to be a very close battle between those two for that competition, and Real Madrid are always one of the favourites to win the Champions League or go far in this particular competition, but I think Vinicius Jr. is the best Real Madrid midfielder they have to offer, and in terms of their assets in general, only Mbappe is above him, but I think when you look at Courtois, I think that is pretty much the triple up you're looking for, and Trent in your defensive line or Howson could also be a decent fourth choice, because it's worth mentioning again, you can pick up to 4 players per club, and that was a change from the league phase where we can only pick 3 to 4 in the knockout phase playoffs, and this will continue for the round of 16 as well. It increases to 5 for the quarterfinals, and it's all covered in my How to Play UCL Fantasy Guide. But after having Doué, Vitinha and Vinicius, how do we approach the rest of the midfield? But I'm going to go for Anthony Gordon, and I know there's a big risk of rotation here, and if you want to go for a more likely Newcastle starter, I think Harvey Barnes might be the play here, and he's also got the goal potential, and he can pick up some assists. He also won a penalty for Anthony Gordon as well, by the way, but I'm less convinced about Gordon here because of the minutes, and even with Newcastle, you could completely avoid them here because the tie is practically done, and they might just conserve energy for the Premier League, where admittedly they're in a pretty sort of mediocre position around mid-table. They're not really fighting for anything at the moment, but this game is all but wrapped up, but they can't be too complacent because in football, funnier things have happened. But one midfielder I'm more convinced about is Lookman, who cost 7 million, and he's going to start against Club Brugge. He also scored this weekend in a 4-2 win over Espanyol. Atletico Madrid have been very inconsistent with 4 wins out of the last 10 matches, and they drew 3-3 against Club Brugge in the first leg, where both Alvarez and Lookman scored. They're by far the best Atletico Madrid assets, and I think they're worth including on a Limitless or wildcard team, that's for sure. But with Gordon, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would you still pick him? Do you think off the bench he could make an impact? And maybe will he start because he has the chance to close the gap between him and Mbappe in the top scorer charts, and he is having an incredible season in this competition, but not the Premier League. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Gordon will be benched, but I think it makes a lot of sense for Newcastle to rotate quite heavily and still get the job done. But with Real Madrid, PSG and Atletico, they're going to go strong, and all these players will start. The same goes for DeMarco in that defensive line, despite the benching we saw in matchday 9. But when it comes to the forwards, there are a few injury updates to talk about. Victor Osimhen didn't feature this weekend. The same goes for Yildiz, and maybe both of them won't feature in matchday 10. But there are other options in the forward line that we can go for. Of course, Yildiz is a midfielder in this game, but McKennie is the Juventus option who is showing form in that position. But I wouldn't go for him over one of Gordon or Barnes, Lookman, Vinicius, Doué, and probably Vitinha, although some of you might want to consider Kvaratskhelia as well for a more attacking PSG option in the midfield. But up front, there is one guaranteed player in here without a shadow of a doubt, and then it becomes very close for the other 2 spots. And with no Ousmane Dembele in the picture, who will likely be sort of rested for matchday 10 as PSG don't want to take any precautions, who do we go for to fill the forward line and complete this 50-man squad? Guirassy can be a bit of a UCL fantasy troll, to be honest, but thankfully I kept him for the knockout phase playoffs, because otherwise the resentment towards him would have just built more and more over time, because I had him for the last couple of match days in the league phase, and he was so disappointing. He even got benched in a plum fixture against Bodo Glimt at the time, and that just kind of summed up his UCL fantasy output towards the end of the league phase. But we know his capability, especially in a home game in the Champions League, and I think Guirassy could do well again against Atalanta, who beat Napoli over the weekend, whilst Dortmund drew 2-2 against Leipzig. But I think Dortmund can still score away from home, and Guirassy is the best asset they have to offer, with Nemec in the midfield being another solid shout. Benzabani will be on penalties if he starts, and Guirassy is second in command, but I think Guirassy is still capable of taking those penalties with Ben Sebaini on the pitch. And as for Mbappe, he got an assist against Benfica for Vinicius Jr. and he's got 13 goals in the Champions League this season. I think he's going to make it 14, possibly even 15 after Matchday 10, and he could actually break the all-time record for the most goals scored in a single Champions League campaign. But Cristiano Ronaldo's record is still incredible considering he played only a handful of games compared to what Mbappe will probably play if Real Madrid go through to the round of 16 and beyond. But Mbappe is so template at this point with 73% ownership, and in terms of captaincy, he's going to be the go-to option on the Wednesday. So my advice to people is to possibly go a bit different on the Tuesday, because if it doesn't work out, you've got a player of Mbappe's caliber and consistency to fall back on if needed. So I always like to encourage people to go for a differential on the Tuesday when possible, and I think Matchday 10 will be one of those examples. But the third and final forward is Alvarez, who scored a penalty against Club Brugge. He hasn't been great in UCL Fantasy this season, and a lot of 6 and 7 pointers really, instead of double-digit hauls, but he is offering some decent consistency here with 5 goals and 2 assists in the Champions League this season, and I think he is one of the best forwards for Matchday 10. If Dembele was fit, I'll be honest with you, I think Dembele would be in this team without a shadow of a doubt, but the recent injuries have caused a lot of complications there, and that's why Guirassy, Mbappe and Alvarez is the sort of template and also the most consistent and reliable front three you can build right now. And there are alternatives, by the way. Patrick Schick scored a brace against Olympiacos in the first leg. Taremi actually had a goal disallowed there before Leverkusen took control of that tie. And you've also got Marquez from Karabag, who could score a goal or two against Newcastle. And one differential would be Visser, because a few players for Newcastle like Botman and Visser are back in training and they're also expected to start or get significant minutes in Matchday 10, so that could be a great differential for you. I think Visser has a very high ceiling against Karabag at home, but I'm still quite tempted to go for Guirassy, Mbappe and Alvarez as the sort of most reliable front three, if you will, and they're going to offer that consistency you need. As for Osimhen, he could still feature in Matchday 10. He's not completely ruled out, but he is doubtful, and he missed out over the weekend where Galatasaray lost 2-0, but they're still top of the Turkish league. And as for the midfield with Yildiz, I'm not really feeling it at the moment, and his consistency hasn't been great when it comes to goals and assists, and he can be a very hit or miss player when it comes to goal contributions and fantasy returns. But I also want to encourage you to leave your thoughts. Who are you captaining on the Tuesday and the Wednesday? And which players do you think deserve to be included in this team? Do you think there will be any comebacks or surprises? Maybe, for example, Olympiacos going through or Club Brugge beating Atletico in Spain. But let's talk about the captaincy here. And on the Tuesday, I think DeMarco would be a great option. The same goes for Grimaldo, but I think if Gordon starts, and of course we won't get this information before the deadline, but I think Gordon would still be the go-to captaincy option on the Tuesday. And if not, you're probably looking at either Barnes or DeMarco as a sort of alternative pick there. And honestly, I don't mind Grimaldo whatsoever. I'm more confident about the Wednesday though, where we have so many options here. I think Mbappe would probably be the Wednesday choice, but it is very template and boring, if you will. And let's not forget the Atletico players in Alvarez or Lookman, because the first leg was high scoring, a 3-3 draw, and we could see a repeat of that in Matchday 10. But I think all of these midfielders and attackers, Vinicius and Guirassy as well, could be considered. And Doué got 19 points for a reason. We saw what he did in the previous campaign, and he was actually classed as a forward back then, and he was a budget pick back in May, and we all had him in our teams for Matchday 17 virtually for the Champions League final where he starred against Inter Milan. But I think with the captaincy here, I'd probably go for one of Alvarez or one of these defenders like Grimaldo / DeMarco on the Tuesday, and you can afford to be a bit different like I mentioned earlier. But on the Wednesday, I'm going to keep it very simple. Kylian Mbappe is still the go-to captain, not just for Wednesday players, but across all players in the knockout phase playoffs. So that concludes the 15-man squad with the Limitless chip, and there's going to be more content headed your way with the best wildcard squad and my team selection. But let me discuss a few ins and outs in terms of fixtures and stats that you're going to need for Matchday 10. It is typical in UCL Fantasy and all fantasy football games in general to chase last week's points, and you can see the highest scoring players in each position, starting with goalkeepers, and Cohn was the highest scoring goalkeeper after a penalty save against Paris Saint-Germain. He got 8 points, and only 3 clean sheets were recorded in the first leg of the knockout phase playoffs, with Courtois, Kobel and Blažević getting those returns. Trubin got a 4-pointer against Real Madrid despite that 1-0 loss, and he remains a decent option, but Real Madrid should score again. With defenders, Grimaldo got 11 points, and Ryerson was the only other defender to produce a double-digit haul. And when it comes to Matchday 10, in my opinion, the most likely to get that sort of return would be Grimaldo, DeMarco, Nuno Mendes, and Hakimi. But the rest of the top 5 includes the suspended Chow, who scored against Karabakh to make it 2-0 at the time, but he picked up his 3rd yellow card of the Champions League campaign, and he's not going to play in the second leg. And Howson and Bensabani complete the top 5 overall with some ball recoveries on top of their respective clean sheets. With midfielders, Anthony Gordon produced one of the biggest returns in UCL Fantasy history, scoring 4 goals and also earning a penalty. Doué is second with 19. Gabriel Serra from Galatasaray scored and assisted. Koop Miners scored a brace, and one of them was an absolutely brilliant finish. And Noah Lang was 5th. So a few Galatasaray players in the top 5, and they also showed their worth in the Champions League. And with forwards, we've got a budget option here in Ho. Let me know the pronunciation down in the comment section below. He got 15 points. Patrick Schick scored a brace and got 13. And Garassi got a 12-pointer courtesy of a goal and assist. Balogun scored a brace against Paris Saint-Germain to put Monaco 2-0 up at the time. And also Tresoldi from Club Bruges has been very impressive in recent matches and showing serious form across all competitions as well. And when it comes to all positions, well, Anthony Gordon was still number 1. Doué, Ho, Gabriel Serra and Schick in the top 5. Some very impressive returns there in the Champions League. And let's see if we can get anything similar next up. But with the top 10 captains, this will give you an insight into my thinking. Mbappe is top, and assuming that Gordon is in the lineup, which is going to be a bit of a sort of hit or miss and a coin flip at this point, I've got him in second at the moment. Desiree Doué in third. Vinicius and Alvarez complete the top 5 with the likes of Hakimi, DeMarco, Kvaratskhelia, Garassi and Lookman in the top 10, but there are more options where that came from, and they will be dissected in the best wildcard squad and my team selection coming up to form yet another triple upload for UCL Fantasy. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Let's get this video in particular to over 100 likes and closing on new goals like 39k subscribers on YouTube. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the next deadline stream, and stay tuned for the best wildcard squad and my team selection.